As you can see behind me, demonstrators have gathered. They've erected a tent similar to those seen along San Vicente Boulevard earlier this year and now inside the gates of the VA. They have set this tent up right outside Ted Lieu's office doors in hopes that he will make a statement about veterans' homelessness issues. Nearly 3 years ago, to the month, the very first tents started popping up here along San Vicente Boulevard, thus creating Veterans Row, an unhoused veterans encampment that was located just outside the gates of the VA.
Not my district, not my veterans.
When someone says not my veterans, how does that hit you?
It's like a knife in the heart, because these are the same people that vote to send us to war.
On March 26th, over 1.5 million Los Angeles residents who received CalFresh saw a decrease in their benefits. I'm Juliet Lemar. Today we're in Santa Monica speaking with local food banks and CalFresh recipients who are bracing for a hunger cliff. Food insecurity can affect more than just your belly. And according to the Department of Social Services, over 1.5 million Los Angeles residents rely on monthly benefits from CalFresh. Residents like Saida Hernandez, a student at Santa Monica College, attributes her family's ability to overcome homelessness to the help they receive from this governmental food assistance program.
I started using CalFresh since I was a little girl. At that time, we were homeless. CalFresh did help me to make sure that I'm still going to school.
In addition to pursuing a degree, Saida also has a job. And now, with the decrease in benefits, she's faced with the possibility of putting her education on hold to support her family.
With the decrease on the CalFresh and the increase of goods such as milk, I would probably not be a part-time student anymore. I want to continue to be a student, to be the first of my family, the first generation, to actually succeed in going to college and getting a degree.
Food banks say that 1 in 5 LA families struggles with food insecurity, and Genevieve Riatort of Westside Food Bank is bracing her facility for a hunger cliff.
Families could be losing close to $300 a month in resources, and individuals are losing about $80 a month.
Losing crucial nutritional support can also put a strain on other basic need areas, such as housing.
Families are having to make really hard choices. So we feel like if we can provide the food, then that helps families to use their limited resources to stay housed.
And food banks need your help in meeting the spike in demand.
It's really important to support local food banks and food programs right now, because that's how we feed people in their immediate need. But it's also important to advocate for the kinds of policies that hopefully won't leave as many people behind.
To donate, you can find your local food bank at lafoodbank.org. Nearly 3 years ago, to the month, the very first tents started popping up here along San Vicente Boulevard, thus creating Veterans Row, an unhoused veterans encampment that was located just outside the gates of the VA. I'm Juliet Lemar here in Brentwood, where we are seeing 2 new buildings being unveiled to provide housing to the unhoused veterans who used to call San Vicente Boulevard home. On May 2nd, 2023, 120 move-in ready apartments were unveiled at the West LA VA campus. Buildings 205 and 208 are for homeless and at-risk veterans who've been waiting for years for permanent housing. Veteran Josh Pewitt was one of many who lived in a tent here on San Vicente Boulevard.
3 years ago, there was about 75 tents up and down the street full of veterans, most of them disabled.
The Veterans Row encampment showcased the need for veterans to be near the VA, for their medical services and for camaraderie, and it came at a cost to those living on the street.
It's like being back in Iraq. It's everything is always on high alert. 2 people got murdered out here.
Josh believes that those 2 deaths could have been avoided had the VA provided housing and mental health services earlier.
It was both mental illness, straight up, and it could have been prevented if the VA would have had them in there.
Josh is expecting to move into the new buildings in a few weeks, but many veterans are still ineligible due to a 30% AMI limit set by the building's developers and made worse by the non-taxed disability benefits they receive being counted as income, thus locking many 100% disabled veterans out of housing.
I feel bad because I've got really good friends that are still out on the street literally right now, and there's still, thousands of homeless veterans.
Veteran advocates are grateful for the progress, but stress there is still much more work to be done.
So 3 years ago this month is when we first set up the tents with flags on San Vicente Boulevard, and that was before there were any tiny home units on this property. That was before any of these buildings were constructed. So it's been a long road to get to where we are today, and I'm thankful that most, not all, of the remaining veterans from San Vicente are going to be moving into these buildings over the next couple weeks. But there's still a lot of work to be done, and the VA is 7 years behind on their schedule to deliver the promised housing. And they're also involved in an active lawsuit.
The current lawsuit against the VA has been brought by 14 disabled and unhoused veterans, seeking to hold the VA accountable for providing 1,200 units of on-campus housing promised by 2015. To date, there are now 233 units of housing on campus.
I'm hopeful that with everything happening today, that we'll continue to keep the momentum going and get this housing built much faster and get our veterans off the street.
After the ribbon cutting, Secretary Dennis McDonough had this message for veterans.
President Biden assigned me to this job with a simple job description, which is to fight like hell for all veterans.
There's always more to the story than what meets the eye, especially when you're talking about Hollywood. And right now, there's over 160,000 union actors and writers on strike. That strike is affecting more than just the people on the picket lines. I'm Juliet Lemar, here in North Hollywood, where we are at a local prop store, talking to them about how this strike is affecting their business. As the historic strike continues, special effects and props creator Ryan Johnson of New Rule FX says that his company has lost 70% of its usual revenue.
So the strike has affected us pretty completely.
Special effects and prop fabricators like New Rule FX are an essential piece of making movie magic. With props such as breakaway glass and wood that keep actors safe, to fake blood, phony money, plastic food, and foam weapons.
The jobs that we get from, the motion picture industry and the broadcast TV industry are all but gone. Coming out of COVID and then being hit with this, it's been kind of a double whammy against us.
For now, New Rule FX is staying afloat through YouTube projects, Halloween horror accessories, custom retail projects, and relying heavily on their savings.
We certainly understand the need for people to be paid a fair wage and for their rights to be represented. And I support all of that. One of the things that's scary is I have no say over this strike. I have no dog in this fight. I can't do anything. So we're kind of just stuck with waiting it out and hoping the industry comes back quickly and very robustly so that we can get back to doing what we do best.
A recent report shows a decrease in enforcement of LA's home sharing ordinance, while violations increased. I'm Juliet Lemar, and today in Mid-City, we are speaking with a resident who is being directly affected by illegal short-term rentals in her building. Kayla Porcinelli is a long-term renter who says 5 out of the 6 apartments in her complex are being used as illegal short-term rentals.
We're the only unit that's left in this building that has permanent residents.
The short-term rentals began 2 years ago, and after an on-site manager moved into the building, things really started to change.
He moved into the building for these Airbnbs. When he moved in, he was doing so much laundry every day. He was always taking up the machine. The room was always a mess. There was detergent everywhere. And then the machine quickly started breaking. When we did complain, we were ignored.
In addition to the laundry issues, Kayla says that she no longer feels safe in her home.
It doesn't feel safe to live in a building where there are people constantly coming and going. It's literally like living in a hotel.
Kayla and her roommates have filed multiple complaints with the city, but so far haven't heard back from officials. So what's happening to their complaints? Well, according to the city, complaints are forwarded to the registered contact person, aka the host of the property. And if the property does not have an active home sharing registration, well, there's no contact for the city to forward a complaint to. To have a legal short-term rental in LA, according to the LA Home Sharing Ordinance, it must be your primary residence, be registered with the city, and have the license number visible on the listing, like with this home, or this one. But on this listing, I couldn't find a permit number, which means it's potentially an illegal listing. Increases in short-term rentals can contribute to rent spikes and the loss of affordable housing, which is why they must be monitored for residents like Kayla, who might be forced to move out.
We'll eventually move out and they'll change this one into an Airbnb as well.
Allison Christie from the advocacy group Better Neighbors LA says recent data shows a decrease in HSO enforcement while violations are increasing.
As we all know, we're in a housing shortage, and so the more units that are taken off the market to be made available as tourist accommodation instead of housing for long-term renters, we find very problematic.
According to a 2022 report by McGill University urban planning professor David Wixmuth, nearly half of short-term rentals in LA are illegal. And non-enforcement is costing the city a whole lot of money, up to an estimated $300 million in uncollected fees just last year.
The city continues to tell us that they have not enough resources to enforce the ordinance properly. If home sharing enforcement was done effectively, it would fund itself.
In response, LA City stated, since November 2019, listings across all housing platforms in Los Angeles decreased by approximately 78%. The city added that its compliance system regularly monitors short-term rental listings on hosting platforms and initiates enforcement for listings that are not registered. To report an illegal short-term rental in Los Angeles, you can contact the Better Neighbors LA hotline or contact the City Planning Complaint Line at 213-267-7788. Andre Butler marks the second veteran this year to be killed at the homeless encampment of veterans along San Vicente Boulevard, which is located just outside the gates of the VA. Today, we talk with Rob Reynolds, who is with AM Vets, about what is needed right now to help get our men and women of service off the streets.
Andre Butler was a Marine veteran. He's kind of a fixture around the West LA VA for years. I think he was only here for a few days before this whole incident happened. And I'm going to miss Andre a lot. Andre's death marks the second out here this year. When veterans arrive here to get services, the issue is there's a consistent lack of same-day services. And what I mean by that is, if someone were to show up today and they were asking for help, the first thing we would have to do is we'd have to send them over to building 402. A lot of people that show up here, a lot of the veterans that show up here are injured. They're in wheelchairs, walkers, or they have mental health issues, PTSD. The VA is not providing any transportation. This campus is huge. And we keep asking the VA to at least send a shuttle over or something.
The West LA VA campus spans 388 acres in total. For reference, Disneyland is only 100 acres. Veterans seeking services and housing must walk from the Eisenhower Gate to Building 402, which is a 2-mile round trip. It took me around 40 minutes to walk there and back.
Then they have to go to Building 500 and get a COVID test. Then they have to wait for the results to come back in. And the admissions for the inside encampment normally closes between 2:30 and 3 p.m. So a lot of times they never make it within that first day. They're asked to leave the property and come back the following day, and they're not registered in a program. By the time night falls, the VA police are going to tell them to leave, and that's when they come out to the sidewalk. And then we have to go through this whole thing of getting them in again. If you don't have consistent same-day services, if you're not taking them in when they're asking for help, this is what happens. I mean, one of the things we asked a year ago was for the VA to put up some signs. I mean, just signs inside to direct these guys where to go. There's like a lot of simple fixes that can be done just to, at least cut the encampment in half.
When we reached out to the VA for comment, they provided this written statement, which outlines the steps a veteran must take in order to receive services, such as taking a COVID test, undergoing a whole health exam, and verifying their veteran status. If a veteran tests positive for COVID-19, the VA is providing a place to safely isolate.
This has been a soldier's home for 133 years. There's been veterans from every conflict since the Civil War that have come here. They will always come here. And that's why it's important that we get this fixed. It's time for action. No one wants these guys on the sidewalk. What goes on here is not the same at every other VA. It's very specific to this location. There's been a lot of promises to build housing that have never come to fruition at all. Years and years of promises and promises and promises, and nothing's happened.